All I can say is that the fake news just doesn't get it, do they? They don't. They don't get Afghanistan. They didn't care. Look, that's a hard issue to get your hands around. It's not fun. It's not politics. So the biggest issue of our time right now, the fall of Kabul, Afghanistan, to the Taliban, the whole damn country, received hardly any attention in 2020 because they were too busy pursuing fake news and anything to get Trump. So I'm going to go through it with you. I'll prove it to you, actually. The Chris Wallace debate, Trump versus Biden, not one mention of Afghanistan. The Kristen Welker debate, Trump versus Biden, not one reference to Afghanistan. The Lester Holt town hall on NBC News, no talk of Afghanistan. Savannah Guthrie, the town hall, no talk of Afghanistan. It goes on like this. Anderson Cooper, the town hall with Joe Biden, no questions about Afghanistan. George Stephanopoulos, the town hall with Donald Trump, no questions about Afghanistan. And it goes on and on and on like this. The only time they wanted to talk about Afghanistan was that fake news story about the bounty being put on American soldiers' head by Putin. That turned out to be totally fake news, a collusion, if you will, between some in the media and the deep state. When that came out, they jumped on it.
You had a phone call with Vladimir Putin on July 23rd. Did you bring up this issue?
No, that was a phone call to discuss other things. And frankly, that's an issue that many people said was fake news.
Who said
it was
fake
a false
news?
I think a lot of people, if you look at some of the wonderful folks from the Bush administration, some of them, not any friends of mine, were saying that it's a fake issue.
It's because you don't believe the intelligence, that's why.
No, it never reached my desk. You know why? Because they didn't think it was intelligence. They didn't think it was real.
It was in your written brief, though.
They didn't think it was worthy of. I wouldn't mind. If it reached my desk, I would have done something about it. It never reached my desk.
But the story did its damage. The fake news story did its damage. And even ultimately, the Biden administration, once they were safely in power, admitted as much, that this was a bogus story. So that's the one time they talked about Afghanistan, a fake news story that they thought could hurt the president. Meanwhile, what were they obsessed with? Anything to, I don't know, any perceived vulnerability about Donald Trump, they hit, and they hit hard.
Let's talk about our next section, which is race in America.
You were asked point blank to denounce white supremacy. In the moment, you didn't.
Systemic racism in America is real. We should not be debating that.
The white supremacy of today has not reached the level it did a century ago. But some of its deeply troubling ideas are returning.
For the fake news, it was much more fun. It was a lot easier to play up this stuff than tackle the real issue of the Taliban, Afghanistan, withdrawal timelines. That was hard and not, for them, particularly interesting. So they focused on this kind of stuff. What was their other mission? To protect Joe Biden. They had to protect him. You know, there was a time where political journalists said to themselves, we got to make sure they're ready to be president by being really, really hard on them. That's how they kind of made excuses for themselves, to ask all these silly questions and to look into their private lives. Well, they didn't even do that when it came to Mr. Biden.
When you hear these remarks, suckers, losers, recoiling from amputees, what does it tell you about President Trump's soul and the life he leads?
Last night, President Trump mocked you for wearing a mask and said that this is a sign that you must have some, quote, big issues. I wonder if you worry that this kind of language that comes from the President of the United States could deter some Americans who are tuning into him to not wear masks.
Let me ask you about another thing the President said last night. He once again suggested to his supporters that they should consider voting twice if they're in one of those states that can allow you to request an absentee ballot. Just curious what you make of it.
One softball after the next, an invitation to bash President Trump. Why do they do that? Well, I think they had orders, whether they were formally ordered or they just took it upon themselves to protect Joe Biden. We all saw that he's very weak. He was very weak during the campaign. Sometimes he just seemed totally, lost. And unfortunately, he seems really lost now, and the stakes are so much higher. This photograph of him at the desk, maybe it's Camp David alone during the worst crisis this country has seen in 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. That does not inspire confidence. Maybe if they were a little tougher on him during the campaign, they would have gotten him ready. This is not just for me. People in the business of politics, in the business of government, have grave doubts about Joe Biden. Remember the name Robert Gates? Robert Gates was CIA director under Ronald Reagan, became defense secretary under George W. Bush, and also for Barack Obama, and worked closely with Joe Biden. Here's what he says about Joe Biden in his memoir published 2 years ago. I'll read from it now. I think Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. That's quite a track record. And nobody sees Mr. Gates as a partisan, really. So what else does he think about Joe Biden? Is he ready to be president?
Still, I think he's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Would he be an effective commander-in-chief?
I don't know. I don't know. I think I stand by that statement.
That was a big, deep breath. He's been in the room with him, the Situation Room, the Oval Office. He didn't know. Well, now we all know. I knew before, you knew before, but now everybody knows. Even the fake news knows. He's not a good commander-in-chief. He's not a good president. He shouldn't be there. But somehow he is. Somehow he is. I have a feeling somebody won't be there for much longer, though. General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Number one, he made a spectacle out of himself in apologizing needlessly for this moment when he walked across the street with the President of the United States. Nobody had a problem with this, except maybe key allies in the incoming Democrat administration. Why would he apologize?
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there.
It's a ridiculous statement. Why did he do that? I believe, and a lot of people do, he was playing footsie with Democrats, and he was pulling for Democrats to win in November. Now take a look at this. This is a very bizarre statement, as reported by 2 reporters, fake news reporters to be sure, but I have a feeling this is a legit story from General Milley. Something else changed for Milley after June 1st, that walk across the street. That summer, he kept hearing Trump warn that he might not trust the November election results, that if he did not win by a landslide, the vote was rigged. So what did he do? Milley told aides that he had reached out to a trusted confidant soon after Lafayette Square. He had a plan, and he needed someone to hold him accountable to it. This is weird. I have 4 tasks from now until the 20th of January, and I'm going to accomplish my mission, Milley told this confidant, referring to the inauguration in 2021. Mission 1 is to get us from now until the election without U.S. troops on the streets of America killing Americans. Mission 2 is no overseas war with Iran. Mission 3 is maintaining the integrity of the U.S. military. Mission 4 is maintaining my own personal integrity. That's my mission, and I commit to you that mission, he continued. And our mission is to ensure the United States of America has a free and fair election with no U.S. military involvement whatsoever. His mission is not up to him. He's kind of giving himself this self-righteous assignment. There's something that does not quite add up about his story, and he's telling somebody else. And you'll notice his mission was not anything about Afghanistan. If only he had started planning back then. It wasn't just the general and the defense secretary and Joe Biden, but what about the Central Intelligence Agency? Where have they been in all of this? They've been playing the woke music a lot lately. Remember their ad campaign a few months ago?
Nothing about me was or is tragic. I am perfectly made. I can wax eloquent on complex legal issues in English while also belting Guayaquil de mis amores in Spanish. I can change a diaper with one hand and console a crying toddler with the other. I am a woman of color. I am a mom. I am a cisgender millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I used to struggle with imposter syndrome, but at 36, I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. I am tired of feeling like I'm supposed to apologize for the space I occupy rather than intoxicate people with my effort, my brilliance. I am proud of me, full stop.
Doesn't she look like that's a middle school? That looks like a middle school and some sort of art project for a middle school. No, that's the Central Intelligence Agency, and she's an analyst with an attitude who works there. I don't care about any of that stuff. We care about whether or not you're good at your job. And too many people at the CIA apparently are not good at their jobs. Let's face it. They screwed up. They helped screw up Afghanistan. No doubt about it. Going back, no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they said there would be. I mean, maybe we ought to change the name of this organization, rebrand it, start again. And of course, their failures to stop September 11th. They should have known. They should have protected us.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.